$500 million. Placed in crude oil futures. 15 minutes before Donald Trump's Truth Social post announcing a pause in strikes on Iran's power grid, oil fell more than 10%. Whoever placed that bet made a fortune. It happened 4 times. March 23, April 7, April 17, April 21. $500 million, nearly $1 billion, $760 million, $430 million, always 15 to 20 minutes before a Trump announcement that moved oil markets, always in the right direction. The Department of Justice and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission are now investigating $2.6 billion in these trades. The White House sent a staff-wide email to all personnel the morning after the first one. Do not place trades using confidential information. The morning after, not before. What follows from this are 2 questions. Who knew, and what that tells you about why this war was actually started? Because a man named Joe Kent spent his career at the highest levels of American intelligence. 11 combat tours across the Middle East. His wife was killed by a suicide bomber in Syria. He understood, better than almost anyone alive, what it cost to send people to die in a conflict. On March 17, 2026, he resigned from his position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center and wrote a letter. In that letter, he used the word manufactured. 15 minutes. By the time we're done, that number is going to mean something very different to you. Let's start with the official version, the one that justified sending 2 carrier strike groups to the Persian Gulf, launching the largest aerial campaign since Iraq, and spending $25 billion of taxpayer money in 60 days. Iran had nuclear ambitions. Iran posed an imminent threat. The Israeli strikes of June 2025 and the American strikes that followed on June 22nd, targeting Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, hadn't finished the job. The program was still active. The danger was still growing. By February 2026, more action was necessary. There's a problem with that version. It comes from inside the apparatus that was supposed to be confirming it. In August 2025, the Defense Intelligence Agency completed a preliminary assessment of the June attacks. Their finding? The strikes had set back Iran's nuclear program by a few months. Not destroyed, not crippled, a few months. Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz directed the DIA. He signed off on that assessment. On August 23, 2025, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired him. No official explanation was given. Senator Mark Warner stated publicly that the pattern represented the administration treating intelligence as a loyalty test rather than a national safeguard. That statement should have been front-page news. It wasn't. Cruz was not alone. 2 other senior Navy officers were terminated the same week: Vice Admiral Nancy LaCour and Rear Admiral Milton Sands. He followed Joint Chiefs Chairman General Charles Brown, fired earlier. Each official removed had, in some way, produced an assessment that failed to match what the administration needed to hear. Meanwhile, the official line held that the June strikes had totally destroyed Iran's nuclear program. A few months later, that same program was described as an imminent threat requiring a second, larger war. Both statements came from the same administration. They cannot both be true. The International Atomic Energy Agency had its own position. Years of monitoring had produced a consistent finding: no evidence of an ongoing nuclear weapons program. Iran's supreme leader had issued a religious prohibition on nuclear weapons development in 2003, a decree that, whatever its political value, shaped the IAEA's technical assessments. Post-strike access was incomplete because Iran suspended inspections of damaged sites after June 2025. But the IAEA made an explicit distinction. Incomplete access is not evidence of production. The administration did not adopt that distinction. And then there was the missile question. In his February 2026 State of the Union address, Trump told Congress that Iran had developed increasingly advanced missile capabilities, capable of threatening the United States. American intelligence officials, speaking anonymously to journalists, contradicted this directly. Iran would not possess ballistic missile capability to strike American territory until approximately 2035. The president held the intelligence community's assessment. He told Congress something different. There's a date you need to hold, February 27, 2026. We'll come back to it. The picture is this: an intelligence director fired for reporting accurately, an international nuclear watchdog finding no weapons program, and a threat assessment that the intelligence community itself did not support. The nuclear pretext, examined against the evidence of the people paid to produce that evidence, did not hold up. But if the nuclear threat was overstated, if a general was fired for saying so, and the IAEA said there was nothing there, something else pushed this to war. A general was fired for telling the truth. The question becomes, what did that truth threaten? Joe Kent wasn't a bureaucrat. He was a former Army Ranger turned Special Forces officer who spent 2 decades operating at the highest levels of American counterterrorism. 11 combat deployments across Iraq and Syria, classified missions that didn't make the news. He understood, from the kind of experience that doesn't come from briefing rooms, what it meant to send people into the wrong conflict. In 2019, his wife Shannon, also a decorated intelligence officer, was killed by a suicide bomber in Manbij, Syria. She died in a war zone. He returned to duty. When Trump won in 2024, Kent was among the MAGA loyalists considered reliable enough for the most sensitive portfolio in the intelligence community, director of the National Counterterrorism Center, reporting directly to DNI Tulsi Gabbard. He had campaigned for Congress on the America First platform. He was not a skeptic. He was a believer. On March 17, 2026, 19 days after the bombs started falling on Iran, he resigned. His resignation letter was authenticated and published in full. The passage at its center: Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He went further. He described the mechanism. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. He called it the same tactic. He called this war manufactured. That word, hold it. Because here's what was happening on February 27, 2026, the date I asked you to remember. That day, the Omani mediator in the nuclear talks reported a significant breakthrough. After weeks of indirect negotiations, a first session in Muscat in early February, a second round in Geneva on the 17th, Iran had placed a concrete offer on the table. Iran would permanently stop stockpiling enriched uranium. Iran would accept full International Atomic Energy Agency verification of all its nuclear sites, complete inspections, permanent enrichment suspension. These were the core American demands. Iran had accepted them. The next morning, February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was assassinated in the opening hours of the operation. The war started 1 day after Iran said yes to the terms that were supposed to prevent it. The Trump administration has an explanation. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff stated that during the final negotiating session, Iranian officials had boasted that their existing stockpile of 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium could theoretically produce 11 nuclear bombs, effectively destroying any possibility of agreement. In Witkoff's account, this statement ended the talks. The diplomats who were present in those sessions tell a different story. Multiple sources with direct knowledge told journalists that Witkoff had misrepresented the key exchange, that Iran was not boasting about weapons capability, but describing the status quo stockpile that would be eliminated under the deal. American negotiators had, according to those accounts, fundamentally misread the Iranian position. Whether that misreading was genuine confusion or strategic convenience is the question that changes the entire framing of the war. What is documented, independently and consistently, on February 11, 2026, Netanyahu met Trump and presented a plan to assassinate Iran's top leadership. Trump's own security advisors reportedly assessed the plan as farcical. On February 26, 2 days before the bombs fell, 1 day before Iran formally accepted deal terms, Trump approved it. The breakthrough came at the negotiating table. The assassination was approved the day before. The bombs fell the day after. You know the pretext now. You know the diplomacy. There's still the money. When you follow money through a war, the trail leads somewhere. RTX, formerly Raytheon, manufacturer of the Patriot missile system and Tomahawk cruise missile, among the most heavily deployed weapons platforms in the Iran strikes, saw its stock increase more than 110% between March 2023 and March 2026. The company stated publicly that many of these munitions will grow 2 to 4 times their existing production rates. Lockheed Martin, maker of the F-35 and the THAAD interceptor, was up 37%. Northrop Grumman, which builds the B-2 stealth bombers used in the strikes, was up 60%. In January 2026, before the first bomb dropped, Lockheed had already signed a Pentagon contract to quadruple THAAD production, from 96 interceptors per year to 400. Each one costs $12.77 million. The math runs itself. The administration then proposed a $1.5 trillion defense budget for fiscal year 2027, a 50% increase over the previous year, the largest expansion in over 4 decades, according to the House Armed Services Committee chairman. The State Department approved $16.5 billion in arms sales to Gulf states within the first 60 days of fighting. In the 5 years before this war began, the top 5 U.S. defense contractors, Lockheed, RTX, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop, had already collected $771 billion in Pentagon contracts. The war extended that arrangement considerably. But none of this explains the oil trades. Defense contractors benefit from every war. That's not a secret. It's a structural feature of the industry. The oil trades are different. They required real-time knowledge of decisions that hadn't been made public. The 4 trades the DOJ and CFTC are investigating were placed through commodity futures markets on anonymous accounts. On March 23rd, more than $500 million in crude oil futures were placed betting prices would drop, 15 minutes before Trump's Truth Social post announcing a pause in strikes on Iran's power grid. Oil fell more than 10%. On April 7th, $960 million bet on a drop, placed hours before a ceasefire announcement. On April 17th, $760 million, positioned 20 minutes before Iran's foreign minister posted publicly about the Strait of Hormuz. On April 21st, $430 million, placed 15 minutes before Trump announced a ceasefire extension. $2.6 billion across 4 separate events, anonymous accounts, correct direction every time. The day after the March 23rd trade, the White House Management Office sent a message to all staff: do not trade on confidential information. The email went out on March 24th. The trade was placed on March 23rd. Representative Richie Torres immediately demanded an SEC and CFTC investigation. The DOJ opened one. No charges have been filed. The accounts remain anonymous. Now there's one more layer to this. The United States economy is structurally insulated from this war in a way most of the world is not. The U.S. is the world's largest oil and gas producer. Domestic production buffers American consumers from the worst of the Hormuz disruption. Weapons manufacturers are American companies. The defense budget supports American employment and capital allocation. Russia, meanwhile, benefits directly from elevated oil prices. Moscow has been consistently described in economic analyses as one of the clearest beneficiaries of a prolonged conflict. The countries bearing the full cost are everywhere else. Japan gets 90% of its crude from the Middle East, most of it through Hormuz. South Korea's stock market fell 12% in a single session, its worst day since the 2008 financial crisis. LNG spot prices in Asia rose 140% following a single attack on Qatar's Ras Laffan facility. European natural gas benchmarks doubled. Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Philippines, import-dependent economies with no buffer, absorbing the full commodity shock. For you, gas at $4.50 per gallon, up 30%. U.S. mortgage rates at 6.38%. The inflation forecast for 2026 revised to 4.2%, 1.2 percentage points above what economists projected before February 28th. Fertilizer costs up 40%, which takes roughly 6 months to reach grocery prices. The people who lacked advance notice of what was about to be posted on Truth Social are paying for this war in a dozen simultaneous ways. The people who had 15 minutes, whoever they are, made $2.6 billion. The DOJ investigation is open. No charges have been filed. The accounts behind $2.6 billion in precisely timed oil trades remain anonymous, protected by the standard opacity of commodity futures markets. Consider what 15 minutes represents. 15 minutes is the gap between someone holding advanced knowledge of a wartime decision and that knowledge becoming public. Across 4 separate events spanning 7 weeks, someone was on the right side of that gap every single time. The White House sent its warning email the morning after, not before. Joe Kent used the word manufactured. The last time that word entered American political discourse in this context was 2002. The claim that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, repeated, amplified, carried forward on intelligence that the analysts themselves privately doubted, turned out to be wrong. Nearly 4,500 American personnel died in the subsequent war. The defense contractors that built the weapons consumed in that conflict made fortunes. The oil infrastructure of an oil-rich region was contested for a generation. Kent served 11 years in the aftermath of those decisions. He then resigned from the highest intelligence post he had ever held to say that the same machinery was running again. The intelligence director who contradicted the official obliterated narrative was fired. The negotiations that were within hours of a documented breakthrough were abandoned the morning after Iran accepted the core terms. The resignation letter from Trump's own counterterrorism director calls the war manufactured and draws an explicit line to Iraq. The pattern is visible. The money trail exists. The federal investigation is open. At some point, the question stops being, is this war necessary? And starts being, who needs it to be? If you want to stay ahead of what this conflict means for the energy and defense positions that matter to your portfolio, that's exactly what this channel is built for.